Democratic Party voters were asked if Vice President Joe Biden should run for president. In Iowa, they're evenly divided. 34% say he should, but 34% also say no. In New Hampshire, 44% say Biden should not attempt a run. But in South Carolina, 48% of Democrats support a Biden campaign. That is his strongest backing from the three early voting states.
The poll was conducted before Thursday's emotional interview on CBS's Late Show. The vice president told Stephen Colbert the grief over the loss of his son still overwhelms him. Former White House Communications Director Anita Dunn met with Biden a few weeks ago. Anita, good morning.
Good morning, Nora. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you here. So what did you see in that interview between the vice president and Stephen Colbert?
I think that the vice president's interview with Stephen Colbert last week was something almost unique in politics, a very private conversation. I think it's fair to say similar to conversations he's been having privately with his friends and supporters, conducted on national television. I mean, that was Joe Biden that you saw. There was no artifice there whatsoever. That's how he feels.
That was our reaction. We all said how, you know, when politicians are so scripted in sound bites, every time even they're on this stage, that it seemed so authentic, like a private conversation.
It really was. And I think that your poll this morning actually is a great illustrator, I think, of where this decision is for so many people. And certainly the vice president was candid about the fact that, you know, he hasn't made a decision yet. The poll basically said, hey, you know, it's not clear, right? And I think that he was clear with Stephen Colbert that he's not going to run unless he feels like he's ready to be president.
Anita, you know politicians and you know Joe Biden, you know his friends. What do you think in the end he will do?
You know, I know politicians well enough to know that I don't predict that until somebody actually stands in front of the cameras and says what they're going to do. I was the person who sent an advance team to South Dakota for Tom Daschle's presidential bid. So, okay.
Let's move on to Hillary Clinton, Anita. What do you think is happening there? The poll numbers show that she's in big, big trouble, including a steep drop, as we pointed out in the 7 o'clock hour, among women voters.
You know, I think that the campaign up to now has been so much a referendum on Secretary Clinton. And as we're moving to this next phase of the campaign, which is a phase of more engagement where the Democrats start having debates, more joint appearances, where the focus really starts becoming the choice, I think this is going to be a much better phase in having her as the figure of a referendum. I also think that in the last week, you've seen Secretary Clinton going to her strengths, you know, the speech on Iran, really policy. She has probably produced more detailed policy proposals in this campaign than any other candidate, ranging from substance abuse to college affordability to profit sharing, you know, things that really will make a difference. And I think that at the end of the day, that is, you know, the place where she is going to be a strong and effective candidate. So.
But the latest issue, The Atlantic says this: it's a bad sign when your campaign needs a reboot. It's a worse sign when your advisors announce publicly, hey, we're going to reboot.
You know, I think that those process stories and campaigns are the ones that advisors hate, but we've all been there. Yeah. They get written, you move on. Okay. So.
This is an interesting year. You look at Donald Trump and Ben Carson. I mean, is there, you think, some sense of the country wanting something very different?
You know, Charlie, I was looking at some of the crosstabs and some of the internals in your poll, and it is fascinating the difference between the two political parties when it comes to this issue. If you look at your Republicans in Iowa, for example, in the CBS poll, you know, a great majority of them want someone who does not have experience in government. They're much more attracted to the outsider business experience, whereas it's very different for Democratic candidates. What it speaks to, I think, is a continued polarization in this country in terms of the parties looking for very different things. But there's no doubt that that is a rocket fuel right now for Donald Trump, for Carson, for Carly Fiorina in that Republican primary.
Does it have something to do with Sanders?
Well, I think Bernie Sanders, who, you know, is one of the most authentic candidates you can get in a year where authenticity really matters. You know, he is what he is. He's comfortable with his positions. He's had them for a long time. And yes, I think people are responding to that. Yeah.
And just quickly back on this Democratic race, John Heilman of Bloomberg reporting that there are some that are advising Joe Biden that he can wait until after the first Democratic debate, which is in mid-October, after Hillary Clinton's Benghazi testimony, which is October 22nd. Do you think Joe Biden could wait that long, late October, early November?
I'm not part of those discussions, but I think that once the debates begin, it becomes an engaged campaign and a dialogue begins, and you want to be part of that dialogue. So to the extent anybody cares about my opinion, I'd say go ahead and get in.
All right. Thank you. Anita Dunn has spoken. We thank you for joining us this morning.